I feel like people are always also looking for the golden ticket to unlock performance, when actually it's very simple. The 99% of the stuff that you do is just the bread and butter stuff.
Welcome back to Fuelin Sessions, where we break down what it really takes to fuel performance at the highest level, physically, mentally, and emotionally at times. I'm Jan, also known as Frodo, and today we're joined by someone who I've spent countless hours trying to follow swimming, biking, and suffering next to, my good friend and former training partner, Kyle Smith. Ranked number 5 in the world, currently a fierce competitor, and never one to shy away from calling a spade a spade. That's why I'm looking forward to this chat and seeing where you're at. Where does this podcast find you?
Yeah, mate. I've spent plenty of time looking at the freckles on your back as well, chasing you around a track, so I'm pretty familiar with that. Yeah, it's I've listened to a couple of the episodes, haven't listened to them all. Always a pretty interesting chat with obviously you and Scott, but I feel like you and I are gonna have a bit of a different yarn. So yeah, kind of looking forward to chatting about whatever we kind of chat about, I suppose. I suppose it's all gonna kind of revolve around nutrition and stuff like that. I feel like we have a pretty good relationship, like me and you, about where my story, I guess, came in. And I still remember you giving me shit about eating Haribos and whatever when we first started training together. And yeah, I feel like I learned a lot from you, and maybe you learned slightly less from me, but still learned a bit nonetheless.
Hey, it's all about the energy exchange, and I always love the vibe you bring to every session. And talking of vibes, where are you at in the season? You've had a bit of a prang on the bike. Just take us into your situation at the moment, where you're at and where your season is.
Yeah, had a bit of a lie down on the road. It's been a bit one of those years, you know. You had last year was a good year, and then this year literally started off January 1st getting a concussion. So not a good start to the year. I was in off season though, so it wasn't too bad. Got over that pretty quickly, and then yeah, then I gave myself rhabdomyolysis before Singapore, just gone way too hard on the heat prep and overdid that one, and luckily kind of caught it early enough. Had a really good doctor on my side who was like pretty much caught it straight away. I was like, mate, I am pissing, really brown. And he was like, yeah, all right, we got to shut this down. We got to, take care of yourself. And so I
Just
said,
quickly, for those that don't know, just take us into what that actually means, what it is, and where it comes from.
I'm not too kind of familiar about the mechanics of it, but basically what happens is athletes can get it, and I think you can get it from a multitude of different things. I think a lot of people who get into training, sort of like say they've been quite sedentary, they get into training real hard, they got a goal, something that's motivating them, CrossFit, whatever, and they go way too hard, then your basically body starts breaking down. And when your muscles start breaking down from a stress response, so for me it was the heat training. I had such a bad stress response, my body started breaking down. The muscle cells break down, and it has myoglobin in it, which is a toxic chemical, and your body can't keep up with that. So your kidneys and your livers just can't flush that out quick enough, and it just basically makes toxicity on the body. And I just felt awful. The whites of my eyes went pretty yellow, so gave myself jaundice, which is pretty scary actually, especially yeah, and it wasn't even something that I was remotely aware of that could happen from anything. And so I think it's just, it actually ties into nutrition quite well too. I think if you're trying to, if you don't, obviously if your muscles are breaking down because you're training too hard, that's one thing, but there's probably things that you can sort of mitigate against those things. But yeah, I think I caught mine pretty early. If you get it pretty seriously, I think some people can actually end up in hospital and with kind of, yeah, almost like blood poisoning.
Okay, so in layman's terms, this is called overtraining, I guess. What's the fancy term for it? What did you call it?
Rhabdomyolysis. So yeah, I guess it's a bit of
Rhabdomyolysis.
overtraining.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's like
obviously in a very simplified way. I'm just trying to, make it. Yeah, I'd never heard of it before, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. I get it. It's obviously a stress and overreaction for going too hard, too quickly at any kind of stress, right?
yeah, 100%. I was going way too hard with the heat prep. I did the standard athlete thing of this is how it went last year. I raced Singapore. I mean, racing in the heat's always awful. If I do more heat prep, I'll be better. And it turns out if you just keep doing more and more and more, I was doing, something every day, and then even, I was doing turbos on the in the bathroom with like a wetsuit top on, just to try and get my core temperature high enough, and it just wasn't going high enough, wasn't going high enough. I put the shower on to make steam, and and there's another thing that I've kind of learned not to always rely on devices as much, like these things are all tools to point you in the right direction. They're not the gospel. And so I was relying on these devices to tell me exactly what was going on. When my heart rate was through the roof, I was feeling like death and I was pushing way too hard. So, I think there are things that are good tools, but at the end of the day, you have to listen. Well, I have to listen to my body. So, yeah, obviously just overdid it way too much. I was also saunaing on those days as well. I'd do like a bike session in the morning and then go to the pool, swim, and then do a sauna after the swim. And just the standard thing of just, oh, if I can do more, I can do more. It's like one of those, I feel like there's so many things like the response to heat training is something that's so out of your control and therefore not under your influence. But the input into what I can do is, it's kind of like training, it's kind of like nutrition, it's kind of like all those things. So, which we can get onto if they're like, maybe in some disordered eating, it's because, the weight loss maybe isn't something you can control, but what I don't eat is almost a thing. And training, you can't control somehow, sometimes you can't control how fit I can get, like that's kind of like the magic that happens in the body. You could train for 3 months really hard and you don't necessarily get fitter. And then, you know, the one thing that you could do is lose a
Carl,
bit of weight.
can I just remind you that you just started off this chapter by saying I just did a standard heat prep that athletes do. You're like a brother from another mother. There's nothing you do as standard. Like you always pick far left of the field, far left or far right, whichever way. I mean, that sounds extreme. That sounds really
Yeah.
extreme. And again, it's funny how you have all these devices and the heart rate ends up being the one that actually tells the truth, right? The device that's been around for like 50 years, you kind of, it is the ultimate tester of stress. So would you
Yeah.
maybe say that it's akin to saying, okay, well, I need to run 28 minutes flat off the bike to be competitive in ITU, and you just start training for 28 minutes rather than building your way there to see where your natural body is.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I've got a lot better at the heat over the years, I guess after just doing it, but it's still one of those things. I was coming off, New Zealand summer's never that hot, and so it was an insecurity that I had that I was like, I'm not going to go super well in the heat. I want to go really well in the heat. And like you say, it's like you say, okay, I have to run 28 minutes it's a runner's race. I have to run 28 minutes to win this race. But it's actually like, yeah, but you're not capable of that just yet. You have to be comfortable with running a 31 minute or whatever. And in the pursuit of running a 28 minute makes you not even make the start line, which is exactly what happened to me in Singapore. I was like, I want to win this race. Maybe like, okay, these are the conditions that don't suit me so well. So I'm going to try and, bend bend the rules, or not bend the rules, but bend the, what do I call it? Like bend my physiology a little bit to try and get into being a good heat athlete by doing a lot of more heat prep. And then, that's a lesson that I've learned. It's like, it's
You
you
do
can do
everything
what
you
you can
can.
do. Exactly. You do whatever you can. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right, with athletes, and obviously having been there, and the discussions we have so often revolve around self confidence. Like, you know what to do. Like, you know what
100%.
to do. And then you're like, oh, but if I do more, kind of the old saying, lots helps lots and more helps more.
Yeah.
Where, whereas, unfortunately, there's always an optimal curve. And do you think that's something that's in your nature, or is it just, where does it come from? Does it come from the fact that you really are just desperate to get to the top level? I mean, we spoke about it. You're top five in the world. You're always on the podium or just off. If you're knocking on the door for a while. Is it that desperation to find the next step? Where do you think the impatience comes from? That you're really kind of always giving it that little bit of, little bit that's just too much. The little bit that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah. It's the classic old like expectation versus reality, right? It's like last year I had last year my expectation was like, okay, I want to get into the series, I want to get a contract, I want to, do this, do this, do this, and I did them all, and I exceeded my expectations, which feels really good. You get so much reward from that, so much dopamine, so much things that just snowball in a good way. And then, I finished the season last year. I got fourth at 70.3 worlds. And because I'd done so well throughout the season, I was super disappointed with fourth at 70.3 worlds. Whereas, like, upon then reflection, if you told me in January, hey, Kyle, you're actually going to get fourth at 70.3 worlds behind Yella, Hayden, and Leo Bergera, we would have been like, oh, I'd be pretty happy with that. But then, obviously, because of the year I had, I'd been winning a bunch of races, I'd been podiuming a bunch of races. I knew I was in my expectation going into 70.3 World, especially my hometown, was like, I want to win this race. And I pushed too hard to win the race and kind of forgot about all the things that had gotten me into that position in the first place. Like, just the simple stuff, like, it's just the classic old, like, yeah. And, then I guess that expectation versus the where I got, I ended up getting fourth at 70.3 worlds, felt disappointed. And it's like such a weird dichotomy that goes on. That's like, I would have been happy 12 months ago, but now I'm not because my expectation was somewhere different. And it's the same coming into this year. Like I finished second in the T100 series last year. And the natural progression for that for any athlete, and it's probably the reason why a lot of athletes are athletes in the first place. It's like you want it so much. So it's like I finished second last year. The natural thing is I'm going to win it this year. And so in that pursuit of going, I'm going to win it, the thing that was out of my control the whole time, I overdid it and I kept pushing and I kept pushing and I overdid it and ultimately it blew up in my face. And I'm on the back foot this season as a result of, like whereas I should have just gone in and it's a beautiful thing to say in your mind and it's really stoic and it's really awesome to say that I'm just going to control the controllables. I'm going to do me. I'm going to be, just keep working on the small things to be slightly better. But that's not how my brain works. It's not how most people's brain, not most athletes' brain work. It's like you want to win. You hate losing. You want more than you did last time. Your expectations are higher and higher. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Like I don't get out of the bed in the morning, in all honesty, to go. I just want to try my best. It's like I get out of bed in the morning because I want to be the best. I will get out of the bed in the morning. When I'm doing a turbo session, it's like I'm not thinking like, oh, if I ride my power, I'll be happy. It's like, no, I'm thinking I want to win that race. I'm dreaming about holding the tape and the feelings that go with that. And so that's the thing that I think makes high performance athletes, but it's also a very dangerous poison as well.
I think Stoicism writes great books, right? But reality tends to slap you in the face, and it's kind of if the raw and honesty that we sometimes experience would come out more. And on that note, I would love to for you to take us to the point where, as an athlete, right, you're probably more tracked than ever. We spoke about wearables, we spoke about all sorts of devices, interconnectivity. To go on a rant of back in the day, I used to have to hand in a A4 sheet of paper filled out with pencil every Sunday afternoon, guessing how much I trained in that, at what intensity I trained throughout the week. Why and how is it still possible that you go and push past your boundary? Like, where is the art that's left? Essentially, I mean, it shows that there is still an art to being a professional, right? And learning a skill that takes years to master.
Yeah, 100%. But it's also like, you can have a compass in your hand. It doesn't make you a good navigator. Like, it's the same kind of concept. Like, these tools are there to help us. They're little needle indicators. They're, the gauges on your race car sort of thing. But the gauges on your race car don't tell you how to go around a corner. It's like we can have all the data in the world, but it's the athlete's intuition. It's the athlete's feeling. It's like, and often the devices are born out of science, and sometimes I feel like the science comes almost secondary sometimes to like what you were saying. Like look at you back in the day and your training. probably changed a little bit, but the essence of it probably didn't change at all. You know, you still have to do intensity, you still have to do duration, you still have to do all these things that make your body react in a certain way and make your body adapt. And, you know, if you look at someone like Sato, you know, very controversial kind of person, but you can't deny that he's had amazing results from his athletes. And, you know, he's obviously a very much a trainer. You know, he inputs training into athletes and monitors the output. And that's kind of the oldest school way of doing it. It's like, okay, someone has a stopwatch, and if they're getting faster, okay, whatever you're doing is you're getting faster and it's working. So yeah, the sort of the devices, I think sometimes I know so many athletes who they live and die on the device and every single new device that comes out because everyone's looking for the next little bit, next little bit, next little bit, right? And I feel like people are always also looking for the golden ticket to unlock performance when actually it's very simple. The 99% of the stuff that you do is just the bread and butter stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how we still have enough need for justification to be reliant on our sleep score in the morning to know whether it's going to be a good day or not.
Oh,
Um,
exactly. Yeah. And the worst case of the sleep score one, and I'm not sure if you're an ambassador for any sleep devices, I certainly am.
uh,
But, you know, I used it for a couple of months and then I was like, what do I like? I haven't changed a single session based on what my sleep score says. It's like, okay, I get up in the morning and I look at my app and I go, oh, it said I didn't sleep super well. And if anything, that puts doubt into your mind. And actually, I've talked to athletes, I won't name who they are, but who say, "Oh, I looked at my sleep score this morning on race day," you know, and they're like looking at, "Oh, I didn't sleep super well yeah, and like, you know, what a way to, you know, if you look at your sleep score on a race day and then it's bad, you know, you're always fighting with that inner demon between, you know, you're trying to push as hard as you can, and there's something in the chimp in your brain saying, no, this hurts, we need to stop. And if you give ammo to the battalion of chimps in your brain, that's, you know, if you add, you didn't sleep so well last night, no wonder you're not feeling great, no wonder you're not in the position that you feel like you're in, and you give ammo to that, you know, I heard that, you know, like, yeah, it's
So
damage.
I wore one during COVID. I tested it. I got sent one and I tried it. And then it was Miami before it was a T100 race around that racetrack. And
Mm,
it was a
mm.
nightmare getting there and back and got stuck with kind of customs and quarantines and whatever else. And race morning again was my worst sleep score by about 50%, which is roundabout when that thing walked into the bin. And I was lucky enough to be late enough in my career that spite took over. Like I was like, I'm going to rip this race apart because I've got a bad excuse. It's kind of
Yeah,
like, you know,
yeah.
the tennis player that feels he's had a bad call against him and he's going to go and beat his opponent and the referee.
Yeah.
But interesting point you made about Sato and being a trainer versus the online coaching. Where are you coached at the moment? I'm assuming it's still online that everything happens. Is that correct?
Yeah, so obviously I'm coached by Dan Lorraine and kind of a similar setup to what you had too, right? And probably in a similar vein of like, you know, I talk to Dan all the time in terms of, you know, messaging, voice notes, all that sort of stuff. But he as well kind of trusts my intuition and trusts my feeling. And I think I've gotten to a point now in my career as well where I can sort of adjust based on how it's going. You know, like I've had enough good days, bad days, or I've had enough sort of situations now, and I've been coached by Dan long enough to go, okay, this doesn't feel right. This is going to be detrimental to race day, and this is going to be, you know, or whatever. And I think I've gotten to a point, like I came up with this concept a couple months ago with talking to a few athletes, and I feel like you have some athletes who are very utilitarian, who are is this going to make me better on race day or is this just rubbish? And there's some athletes who are like, nope, it's on my program. So, for example, like, you know, you see people running around, they've got and there's two kinds of things to it, but you got 30-minute jog on your program and someone's done 29 minutes and 10 seconds and they got to run around the car for 50 seconds to make it to 30 minutes. And look, there's that completion part of that, but then there's the other side of that, like that's not going to do anything on race day. It's going to make you any difference. It's an extreme example, but you know, I've kind of gotten to that point now where I'm talking to Dan with my intuitive feedback being like, hey, I actually feel like we might just be heading down the wrong kind of fork here, where I feel like this stimulus isn't quite working for me. I feel like this is what I need. And but based on the good years and the bad years I've had, and then we've got other stuff going down, you know, this is working. I need to be doing this. This is feeling really good. I tell him when I'm feeling good. I tell him when I'm feeling bad. But again, he doesn't see me on a day-to-day basis, and I feel like that is the benefit of someone being on pool deck, whether they're, you know, and but I also feel like you have to have the. I've had plenty of coaches who I've been coached by one-on-one who don't have the nous or don't have the experience to look at an athlete and be like, get out of the pool, or you're like, you talk to people who are in Sato's squad and they jump in and they've got 500 meters into their warm up and they're like, yeah, I feel fine, and he's like, mate, go home, because he saw something in his intuition. He might not be able to explain it, but he saw something that goes, okay, that's not going to be a good day today, or he might see someone flying and adjust it. So I feel like, yeah, both of them have merit for sure.
Yeah, it is interesting how, and I can relate to this as well because I was in your position and felt in the same position, and then probably both of us would go into the sauna room or the laundry and ignore everything that you just said, right?
Yeah.
Because you have all the signals, everything is there, your body is screaming at you, and yet you manage to steer past those signals. And that's why I find it interesting, to go, as you say, a trainer versus more of an online coach or somebody who's there sporadically, and looking at the data only and retrospectively looking at your feedback and just how important it is. Mate, I'd love to transition a little bit to where it's gone. I've obviously been out of the game a couple of years. Performances are exploding everywhere. We just saw Ironman Frankfurt. Roth is coming up. Times of people being set where you're like, wow, this is just astronomical. KB Christian went 7:25, I think, 2:30 marathon off the bike. And even Christian Horgenhauer, who's like off the front all day, runs a 2:42 off that kind of bike ride and gets caught. I'd love to hear your take on where it's going and why it's gone that way.
I think like what we were saying about the technology, but I honestly think some of that technology is the 1% maybe difference that it's been making, things like core sensors and heat training and stuff like that. It's kind of like, I feel like that's the small percentages, but I feel like the big one, and you can take in running shoes into that, and not just race shoes either. I feel like the technology that's come into training shoes, training in those super shoes and training in high stack foam, back in, go to say, even when we first started training together, the shoe technology that exists, 4 or 5 years ago wasn't the shoe technology of today, where you can just get away with putting more load through the bones and more load through the body. So I think that's one thing, but I think like the big thing that has just been unlocked the last 2 years is the nutrition. You know, like we kind of joked at the start, you were like, mate, you're eating a lot of those Haribos, and I was like, yeah, I know, but like they do feel good,
You're ahead of your
like
time.
yeah, a little. But even so, I wasn't even, because I was having like one bag of Haribos on a long ride, and it was like
Yeah.
now it's like one bag of Haribos every 45 minutes. I train with Ruben Zapunta, the German powerhouse, and he can put away sugar like no one else, eh? Like it's like.
Mika
And
Nut, maybe. I think Mika
yeah,
Nut is the champion. But anyways, yeah, I know
yeah,
what you mean.
exactly. And it's like, just fueled by carbohydrates. And it's probably, just that maybe acceptance of that, and just the acceptance of like you need to put fuel on the furnace. And then when you're putting fuel on the furnace, you're not running sessions depleted, which means that your muscles are responding to every impact on the ground, which means that you can recover faster. It means that you're not putting as much load through your skeletal system, means you're getting higher intensities out per training session, and then also not sort of going to catabolic state as well in any of your training. So, you're just keeping on top of things. And I feel like now, like even now, sometimes I'm like, oh, like, the amount of carbs we're eating actually like makes me feel sick. And, you're going out on a bike ride and it's like, oh, today I've got to do 120, 150 grams of carbs an hour on the bike, and then you get home and you're like, I'm actually just stuffed, like I don't want to eat anymore. And I know from even when we first started training together, it'll be like you fuel your training, you might have a bit of carbs on the bike, and then you get home and you tear open the pantry and you try and recover then, kind of like retrospectively. Whereas now I feel like it's preemptive loading, or it's almost like, yeah. And I feel like the loading and the preemptive stuff and not getting your blood glycogen low and can just mean that the intensities can be higher, the adaptations can be quicker and higher, and the paces can just be that much more powerful. And then I feel like people are getting to race day and adding in more fuel on race day. You talk about someone like Cam Worth, whether I sort of subscribe to that 200 grams per hour, like, or whether it's another Cam FM story, or if it's, yeah, like, I don't know if it's, but it's just they're doing so much more than we ever used to. I've, when I did my first two Ironmans, so Ironman New Zealand and Ironman World Champs in St. George, so this was only 3 years ago. 2.5, 3 years ago, it was like, I went out on the race course and we'll see, like I'll go out with what I've got and I'll have some Gatorades out on the course, and I don't know, there'll be some gels out on the run course, and I'll have a special needs bottle and she'll be right. Whereas now it's just so like, so calculated. It's, oh yeah, now I'm getting out the swim. I'm surprised no one's actually eating in the swim yet, like, and then they're getting out the swim and it's loading in transition. It's 150 grams an hour on the bike, and it's just no wonder. It's just maths, right? Like you can put out such a higher power output when you're glycogen heavy, and so that's what I think they're doing.
Yeah, it's a lot more planned. I do have to laugh when you talk about St. George. I'll never forget the story about how you got blisters and found found some volunteer who had some duct tape and taped up your feet so you could make it through the run. I mean, it feels it feels like the sport was almost so caveman like a few years ago. And I subscribe 100% to your theory, in terms of racing, athletes are not blowing up because there's more energy available. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a pro rider, and a pro cyclist, that is, and he was just saying how, that level of fat metabolism adaptation, the suffering that you used to have to go through, that took years to build. Like right now, it's the opposite. Like every ride, technically, if you're not sponsored, it costs you 40, $50 just to keep up with the amount of gels you have to take if you're not having Haribos. And, if on any other kind of exercise regimen would be sure to cause diabetes, but right here, it is the way to go in terms of training philosophy, which went, from super high volume, say maybe a decade and a half ago or 2 decades ago, and then it reduced to super low volume, but really high intensity because you couldn't combine intensity and volume. Whereas now, exactly for the factors that you just spoke to, you can actually go and just maintain because you come home and yeah, you're tired from the session, but you're systematically not depleted. The pantry no longer is relevant, which I almost feel sorry for, because I mean that banana peanut butter smoothie at the end of my session used to be like the best thing to look forward to. And now you
Yeah,
just want to lie by the pool.
but the dudes are still doing it. They never stop eating. It's an eating competition now. But tell you what, though, if you thought dentists were making a lot of money a few years ago, they are making bank now.
Really? Have you noticed that? Is dental health something you've noticed?
Yeah,
Because it makes a lot of sense, like with wind kind of like blowing the sugar onto your teeth.
yeah, 100% doing acidic lactic acid sessions, and then you're adding fructose in high amounts into the body. That's just pure acid. And yeah, I think like from we can actually get into this actually. So when I had my, I guess, health, 2022, moved into a house that had mold in it. If you haven't heard the story, but had mold all through the ceiling. The veranda that was above the apartment was leaking in rain every time it rained. So there's basically a layer of mold in our ceiling we couldn't see. And I got really sick. My partner got really sick. And so, yeah, that was derailed my whole 22, 23. And so end of 23, then this whole time I was digging down every single rabbit hole, some that I didn't want to go down into health, like just trying to find what is wrong with me. I started training
Mold
with
is more
you.
common than not, too.
Oh, Absolutely, and I feel like there's a level of mold. It's like out drinking alcohol, right? If you have one beer a day, it's going to be fine. But if you're sinking it from 7 a.m. in the morning all day, you're not going to be fine. And I think it's like that same thing. There's a level where your body can keep up with it, and it's fine. And then there's a level where it just can't. And in this apartment, it was like, me just on a 24-hour bender of, mold. So I was just not in a good place, and I was like, okay, what is wrong with my health? And I hadn't really, I've been young. I think I was 23 at that point, and I was like 23, 24, and I'd been almost bulletproof up until that point. I train, I get better, and I'm fine. And I train, and I get better, and I'm fine. And it was that kind of, and then this health thing just kicked me to the ground where I'd wake up every single morning and I was like, oh, I feel like absolute rubbish. But just the typical athlete thing of like, should be fine. I just still have to get out there and try my best and hope tomorrow's a better day. And every single day I was doing that and getting worse and worse and worse and not performing, getting sick all the time. And then, yeah, like someone was like, okay, you need to look at your dental health, you need to look at your bloods, you need to look at all sorts of things, and kind of highlighted how important the dental health actually was. Like if you have a cavity in your mouth, basically that infected blood goes into your bloodstream, and then your body has uh, like an infection basically that almost becomes systematic, and so then your body just has like a low level of fatigue and tiredness, and you can't make adaptations because your body's already trying to sort of adapt, make a stimulus to the infection. So got all my teeth sorted. I get a checkup every 6 months, just to make sure that everything's fine. So my teeth, and I do try and look after my teeth, but the last time I was in the dentist was like, how much sugar are you having per day? And I was like, I was like, I have no idea. Like, I was like, I take about,
Buckets.
I was like, the amount will make you sick. And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, when I'm out on the bike, I train about 5 hours a day, and on a hard day, I'll be doing about 100 grams of sugar an hour. And
Half a kilo.
she's like, yeah, but this is not, this is just in training, So it's like probably like 600 grams. So yeah, call it half a kilo of sugar a day. And she's like, we recommend 30 grams a day of sugar. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. So just make, and she was like, can you do anything about it? Like, can you, have mouthwash with you? And I'm like, no, like, I'm not out there doing threshold efforts and put some Listerine down the mouth, or, and she was like, can you rinse it out with water? And I was like, I suppose I can, but it's kind of the last thing on my mind when I'm, racing or doing efforts or anything. So she's just like, hey, just make sure you brush your teeth a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, obviously looking after the dental health is super important, and then kind of flows on throughout the whole body, right? Just making sure that you have that solid foundation of your pyramid so that you can of health so that you can build your training and your layers on top of that. And actually the biggest thing that I found this year is having filtered water. I know you had a whole house filtration system when you were here in Girona, and I just got a tap one because the water quality isn't amazing. And if there's sort of bacteria in the body, and especially in the summer here, we're putting away, well, probably close to 10 liters a day, on a big training day. And so if you're just putting down so much water with bacteria and horrible stuff in it, and I actually found out yesterday that I was looking at my municipal water in Topor, where I live, and it has about the same as a swimming pool amount of chlorine in the water, in our water supply. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's so out of it. Like that can't be good for you, especially like I say, as normal people. Like if my parents would probably do maybe one glass a day, and the rest of it's cups of tea and Pepsi for my dad. But for us that are drinking a lot of water to obviously hydrate, like that's a lot that's going through the system, and I can only assume that if it's killing so much bacteria in the swimming pool, it's doing the same to your gut. So,
Good and bad bacteria. Yeah. That's always the problem.
100%.
So yeah, you'll have to forgive me for having a little sponsor plug here, but I have been invested in Morton for many years. 2018, I was invested with the company before this whole kind of carb crave started, and they've actually designed their products to be pH neutral, or at least close to, for exactly that reason, to protect your tooth enamel. Because that's exactly it. Like you're consuming sugar, and later you're like burning it onto your enamel because of the wind when you're on the bike. you kind of in a very layman's terms, that's how it was explained to me, and much of the formulation is around that. And then to your point, like chlorine, all the other things that you consume without really knowing, right? It's the same thing. Again, if you make a science of it, it's endless. Because then you start drinking from plastic bottles. You buy filtered water, you put it in plastic bottles, and you're like, oh, this is never going to go right.
Yeah.
And somehow we end up being faster and living longer than ever. So I don't know, something's going right. But yeah, anyways, I do think the nutrition topic is something that, yeah, it is like anything. It's such a new thing that we don't know what it actually means. In terms of our performance, it makes sense. And it seems ludicrous. Like, I don't know, when did people stop drinking red wine at the Tour de France? You know, I feel like that was the point when sports science was invented, when people realized, okay, you have to look after yourself. And no one in that whole time ever got the idea that if you put more in your tank, you'll get more energy out. We always figured, well, you better be skinny so that you can perform better. It's all about watts per kilo. You know, Tour de France is about to start. Everybody's kind of out there being as light as possible, and at the same time looking to push 7 watts per kilo. I do kind of feel that, yeah, it's probably a happier generation of athletes as well. You know, it's kind of
Oh,
the whole
100%.
mental energy that comes with not being hungry must actually be quite amazing.
Yeah, oh, 100%. You know, you can actually get back and you're not just hung or bonked, annoyed, hot
Yeah.
and bothered, like that sort of stuff. Do you reckon in the Tour de France there was like a nutritionist going around the teams going, guys, you like just listen to me here, just give me 5 minutes of your time. If you have cocoa pots for breakfast, sugar on your cereal, you're gonna win the tour. And he's just every team told him to go and just do one.
Imagine the Italian director sportif. I think he just die if it's anything other than pasta and tomato sauce. It's like, oh, this can't be.
Yeah,
But
100%. And the French guys are still taking the middle out of their bread. No, no, like that's just not the way we do things.
yeah, but I mean, just imagine that. Imagine any nutritionist 10 years ago would have recommended Rice Krispies for breakfast. Like, I
Mm,
still can't recommend it with a good conscience because I just think there's too much other rubbish in it that you don't need, right?
100%.
I mean, I always give the example of my first ever Kona socks from the marathon. I've got them to this day, and they're like blue, green, and orange from the various flavors of, I think it was Gatorade that was handed out at the time. You know, those colorants and that stuff, I don't think you need in your body.
No.
But as a performance factor, it's fascinating, and I do think it explains a lot of the trends going that way.
Well, that's the other thing, right? It's like it's a funnel, and nutrition is sort of deep and wide, and there's so many nuances to it. And we say, eat a lot more carbohydrate and I'll eat a lot more sugar, and then a lot of people will take that as, let's just go out and eat Skittles and whatever. And then you're like you say, like you're, I think we have to treat food like medicine, and we also have to treat food like poison too when it's poison. Like I feel like there's so many those colorants, and each country has different ingredients that are allowed in food as well. And so, like when I was in the States, I'd have to, we the carbo loading that we do now, the day before the race, we're doing 800 to a kilo of carbohydrates the day before the race, just to carbo load. And you can't get that in via normal route, so you have to go down the sweets or the candy or whatever you want to call it. So you go into the store and you go, okay, let's have a look at some Skittles, say, for example, that's on the 7-Eleven store. And then I look at the ingredients list, which is obviously we're trying to be high level operators here. So it's like you can go mad, like you say, with the plastic drink bottles and everything with like all the nuances. But, you just turn around and look at the colorants that are in it. And one, just for example, is a colorant called tartrazine, which is a byproduct of turning back in the day when they turned coal into coke. Then there's a byproduct from that. They wanted to use it, industrial waste, if you want to call that. They put it in the roads. It was too toxic. So a British chemist made it into yellow dye for plastics and clothing. And then some genius thought, okay, well, if you can use it for plastics and clothing, this yellow color, and it's really bright and pops out and kids will love it, we can put it in food as well. And then you sort of just look at some of the byproducts of that, sort of asthma symptoms, and you'd probably be pretty, whatever you want to call it, but that's just one of the colorants that's in a lot of the foods that that they use. And I'm not sure that it's even legal here in Europe or especially New Zealand, but I know in the States it was. So you're like, okay, I got to stay clear of that. So I'm going to like organic. I'm going to Trader Joe's to buy organic candy. I'm like, what has this come
Yeah.
to? Like, and I feel like that's the sort of level that now I've gotten to. I feel like it's sort of that, like I say, the cone of like, okay, I had to remove the mold that was quite a big one, and then I removed the bad stuff from the water, and you keep going, and then you go, okay, actually, it's probably not ideal that I drink from a lot of plastic bottles, especially when it's really hot. So, but you can drive yourself mad at the end of the day as well with that kind of stuff. And going back to my sort of beer drinking analogy, if you can just minimize the amount of bad stuff that's going into the body, like the microplastics, the chemicals, the colorants, the don't live your life trying to avoid it, and don't go, I can't eat this meal because it comes from this place, or I can't do this. Like, you still have to live your life at the end of the day, but if you can just avoid those things that are going into your body and just try and make it as natural and as clean as you can, then I think that's the body's only going to be in a better place because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's also remember, like, especially as a young athlete, very often you're on a budget and you just go and look at the packet of XYZ and you look at the amount of carbohydrates or of protein in a recovery product. So I think it is also a luxury that's to be afforded. And at the same time, I feel like it's just dropped the age level of kind of world class performances into Ironman. Be interesting to see actually what it does on the opposite end of the spectrum. Whether it allows people to go longer, like later on in the age gap, to hold performances as well. Because I guess the same thing holds true, right? Injury risk just becomes more. As you were saying, you used to get punched down and just shake yourself off the next day. Which brings me to an interesting point, because you've raced two Ironmans, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Taupo and St. George Worlds, is that right?
yeah. Hmm.
And now you've focused your journey. I know for a while you were focused on trying to make the Olympics. I think you found your groove and your niche probably with the T100 series. Where are your thoughts going in terms of the possibilities? You're still a very young athlete. Classically, previous year would have said, you know what, dig your teeth into 70.3 or into the T100 distance, then build up, and one day you'll do an Ironman kind of thing. That order has obviously been flipped on its head for the reasons we just discussed. Where is your head at personally in terms of where's the future of Kyle Smith in a sport?
Yeah, look, and it also comes back to that thing that I just said before about like, what do I think about when I'm on the turbo? What motivates me? What gets me up in the morning? And like the T100's really doing that for me. 70.3 Worlds in my hometown was everything for me last year. That was the thing that was the driving force behind every hard training session or whatever, was to try and win that race. And yeah, like the Ironman really, really motivates me. I think when I was watching all of the races last year, and obviously some of the races that maybe I was supposed to be in and I wasn't, like Ibiza last year, I watched the race, but I didn't actually feel too much FOMO. The one race that I felt FOMO is that photo behind you in Kona. It was just like, there was the one that just for some reason I was like, I want to be there more than anything. And Nice didn't do that for me, but Kona did. And Kona presents its own challenges for me, as an athlete. Obviously, what we just talked about in the heat, I think I'm getting better in the heat, but obviously that's a big one in Kona. But I feel like the Ironman distance and the Ironman does really motivate me, and it's something that I feel like I could be very good at. But on the same, or the other side of the same coin, I feel like I'm doing really well at 70.3. I found my and T100. I found my groove. I found my distance. I found what obviously is working quite well for my physiology, and it is very motivating for me right now. And so I think obviously things can change, but I feel like I was umming and ahhing whether doing Ironman New Zealand at the start of this year to try and get a knee slot. But I think next year I'll definitely do an Ironman. And look, if they go like the last two did, like the last two I've capitulated completely on the run, hobbled through the last 20K. I don't remember the last 10K of Ironman New Zealand, legitimately. Like, I don't remember the finish, drug testing, prize giving, anything. Like, I was lights out, just a walk-in zombie trying to make it to the finish. And pretty similar in St. George. Hoping that these things that we talked about with higher carbs and higher nutrition make it a lot more pleasant experience. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to dabble in Ironman again next year. I'll definitely probably try and do Ironman New Zealand. Obviously, it's in my hometown. It's like I roll out of bed and I'm okay from the start, so it's super easy. And we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm committed to as well the T100. I think what they're doing is an amazing format, and I feel like they've really elevated the sport as well, and so I'm pretty committed to seeing that through as well, and see it get some wings. And I'm really motivated by trying to just become a better athlete through it as well. I feel like the series long narrative suits me as an athlete. Like I feel like I'm kind of someone who can race really hard. I have to recover super hard as well. Like I'm always such a shell for that next week after going that deep in a T100, and then have another build up to another race. And I feel like I've got a good sort of formula, so to speak, to work that out through a season. But at the end of the day, I feel like, what motivates me if I feel like just having one really big performance like Kona, or one really big shining light like I had last year with 70.3 Worlds, is super motivating to have that burning underneath you all season.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you still think in this day and age, as a professional, you have to choose between the two? I understand the training's different and the speed and the intensity's gone up, but we see guys like Martin Van Riel, who's obviously was at Ironman South Africa, where he had on a super tough course, had a hard day
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
and he's back at the T100. Then he's back in 70.3. No one cares because there was an Ironman on the same day.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it is fascinating where the energy and the magic of our sport is, right? Speaking towards whether Nice pulls you in or not, I don't think it did so for a lot of people. But that shining light of Kona being up next year. Back to the question though, do you think you have to choose? Is it an either or?
I don't think it's an either or at all. I feel like I feel like you have to choose between doing a lot. I don't think you have to choose between the two distances. I feel like you can do both distances very well, but I feel like the concentration of races is the difficult thing. Like if you say, are you going to perform really well every single 3 weeks for 10 months in a row, then the answer is no. Like there's just no way. Like you peak and you trough so hard from those races. But I feel like if you said, hey, do you want to go and do, say, next year, do you want to go and do 70.3 Worlds in September and Kona in October? I'd say, yeah, I think you can really do that because, like what we were saying, like, back in the day, the old thesis was I've got to get myself so fat adapted to be able to make the Ironman training distance. Like what we were doing, like, or more what you were doing. And I sort of came into it in those, latter years. But like, okay, we go out riding, and I can't remember the last 5 hour ride we did. What was it like? You have 5 almonds every hour. That was like a ride that we did on the turbo at altitude, and like that,
Jesus, Jesus Christ. We did some stupid stuff, did we not? Man,
like,
sitting in
oh,
that garage listening to some techno,
just sucking on some almonds and smelling
sucking
some
almonds.
celery.
Oh, goodness.
So I think
Yeah.
back in the day, you couldn't do both because, say, you were trying to get ready for a 70.3, and the 70.3 awards was always in September, Kona was start of October. So you're trying to get your body into such an efficient metabolic state, fat burning, that you're doing, you just haven't done the intensity to race 70.3. Like, your body hasn't burned at that high caliber energy because you've just been sort of, I guess, low and slowing it for 4, 5, 6 months to get ready for Kona. And obviously it worked really well for Kona, but maybe not necessarily the 70.3 odds, although, you won both. Uh, and so I'd say, and I also think that you're a bit of an anomaly as well, because like you say, you had that savage tenaciousness about you as well. But I think you can do both within a season. I think you can be really good at both. And look, Christian is the prime example of that. I feel like, the paces that they're running at the Ironman, you have to do intensity, and that just translates, I think, to the 70.3 distance as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we talk about carbs and how much easier it is in terms of things, right? But you still got to go deep, and you still got to go deep in a very, very different way. And, winning certainly hasn't become any easier, even though you've kind of got a bit of grease that helps you along, right? It helps you probably, if anything, put your horsepower onto the road better than before, and rather just have the fall off and the drop off of the performance towards the end. But when we talk about going deep and when we talk about going to those dark places, whether it's mid races or mid season, for you, what pulls you back? Like what fuels you besides caffeine and carbs? What's there?
What's the motivation? Yeah, it's because I want to be the best athlete in the world. Like, essentially, I've always avoided that question. I've always been like, I've always said that as like I've done the political thing of saying like, okay, I just want to be the best athlete you can be, live up to my potential, and it's like, no, it's bullshit. Like, it's bullshit. Like, I want to be better than the other dudes on the start line. I want to be better than every other triathlete who's ever donned a tri suit. Like, that's just the truth, and that's what I want. And so, and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's like, you know what? No, I'm actually going to be better than these people, and like I look at Hayden and Hayden doing these amazing things, and I don't go, okay, I'm gonna roll over and let you scratch my belly. I'm like, fuck, how do I run that fast? Like, I'm like thinking like, okay, what do I have to do to run, or what do I do to have to beat him? Do I have to swim ride harder? Do I have to do this? It's like, it's not like, it's okay, like Hayden's gonna win the race and I'll just do my best. It's like, that's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's like, it's that burning desire of just wanting to be the best and hating losing too, like you saw my face after London and I got second. And again, like, it was like, I got second in San Fran. I was like actually quite happy with San Fran because it was above my expectations, but I wanted to win London, and Sam Laidlow just being that carrot dangled out in front of me for 18K on the run and then coming that close. It was like, I should have been stoked to get second, but I was just like, like, I lost. I didn't win second. I lost first. It's like, that's now what drives me. Honestly, it's what's always driven me, but I've been too afraid to say it. And I've been too, I guess, political. I didn't want to sound arrogant. I didn't want to sound big-headed. I didn't want to get like, maybe it's like the Kiwi in me that's just like, no, you keep your head above below the parapet. And, but it's like, no, that's actually like, well, honestly, if like, when I look in the mirror, it's like, I want to be the best athlete in the world. And that's what keeps me coming back.
Refreshing. I love it. I absolutely love it. I think, well, that was always my philosophy. And I don't think it's arrogant at all. It's not one bit arrogant. It is just a reflection of what drives you and where you want to get, where you want to be. The one thing I would probably give you along on your way, even though we've discussed the reality of it, is certainly and I think a lot of other people, not just your mum, see your potential of where you can be. And if you believe that potential, then you can start comparing yourself to your yesterday.
Yeah.
And you just have to get to that point where you believe that's enough. I think that's probably for all listeners out there. That was something for me that flicked the switch when, Alistair Brownlee came on the scene in 2009. He was all of a sudden that North Star. He was like the very unhappy and very unfriendly Hayden Wild that you just mentioned, who just came out. And when he was on, and he was always on, he would smash us, right? And he would break athletes, but he came out and unapologetically just realized like he's just going to be that guy. And once I stopped comparing myself to him, that was actually when my career took off. So, it's the problem, especially now. The depth of field is so much more than it was a while ago. That I
Yeah.
feel, yeah, if you can just find that'll, it's difficult, but believe that your yesterday was the best you could do. And then don't try to take the shortcut to tomorrow. Just go through today and realize you just have to be half a step better than yesterday.
But that's, I guess, the process, like the level of we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the levels of our processes. I guess it's that kind of same thing. Like the goals and the motivation, I guess, is the fire underneath that's burning, but it's like, it's the process, it's like you say, like it's not like I'm just like, foaming at the mouth every day running around the track because I want to bet ahead and wild. It's like, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's what I'm thinking about when it gets really hard. But actually, the process is like, okay, like just step by step, bit by bit, don't take too many chunks out of it. Just, listen to the body, do the right thing, eat the right food. Just the day by day boring process that you fall back to. And it's like, okay, when I'm feeling bad, and you can't rely on motivation because motivation is such a fleeting thing. It's never stable, but your processes are and your routines are and and so just doing those things and just making sure that you're getting day by day. like you say, better. And even when I've now had a setback, obviously I crashed my bike, 2 weeks ago and I had to take a week off. So it's like, you get set back a bit, but it's not then the old me would have gone like, now I've got to double down because I've missed a week. It's like now I've got to do more because I've missed a week. But the new me, I think I've had enough painful experiences and painful moments to realize that like that only leads to that's sort of kind of a road of despair instead of like, okay, now I just get back to doing what I can do. And I am more and more now realizing like, okay, there's like a 95% like that you can get to always almost, like what we do in the pool, like, and there's a thing in my mind that's like we have a set that we did, I still do it every Monday, 3 by 8 by 100, leaving on 140. And I know if I'm swimming sub 110 comfortably, I'm good to go on race day. And then I have those things on the bike, I have those things on the run. So it's just getting back to those places. And then once you're back there, I feel like then it's like, okay, now just take a little bit, take a little bit, take a little bit. And that's the point where I got to last year, where I came into the season into Singapore at that point where I'd built and built and built and built, and then I was in a really good space, and then it was just like, okay, you race, and then you go down a little bit in your recovery week, and then you just build back to that, and it's like that. It's a rippling ocean instead of tidal waves. So that's, I guess, what I've learned throughout my career, and because the old me definitely, and you saw it too, like you say, like at the start, those extremes, and now I've done the extreme with the heat prep, and I've learned, okay, you can't mess around with that either because that's just like training, like the
Well,
heat
it's
prep.
just, again, you have a baseline and you try and improve on it. And the beauty of trying to improve on your process is what I call getting better at getting better. It really means that, yes, every now and then you have to accept a setback, but all you got to do is from that setback be a little bit better. And I feel, again, it sounds stoically easy once you subscribe to it. But the trouble that if you are just focused on that external goal is that when you reach it, it's gone. And
Mm.
you'll wake up and you'll be on the pool deck and you'll wonder why on earth should I now jump in and swim, 3 by 8 by 1, and absolutely kill myself on the last set to make the times because you've already got gold in your pocket, kind of thing. So that's why I think the process is valuable.
How did you feel like, say, you won Kona and you probably had like a bit of a, you'd be like, I will feel X when I do Y. How did you feel once you won Kona? That was the first time. Was it like, did you have and maybe after the Olympics too, did you have a bit of like a down period after that where like, almost like a post Kona blues?
No, I had a post-Olympic blues. Like I literally, 2008 was my first international race I won ever at the Olympics, and that's exactly what happened to me. I had this external goal, and all I envisaged was holding that red tape between my hands. And when I did, it was amazing. But I tell you what, I felt equally far low as I climbed up the mountain before, and that's why having this kind of process and focusing on yourself improving upon your yesterday, when I won Hawaii, I realized, like on my way there already, an external goal is not good enough because the next time I reach it, I'll fall into that same hole again.
Mm,
So having a goal is crucial because you need to tie a timeline to it and you make it real and you make it emotional. But you basically need to find your inner why.
mm,
And for me, the pursuit became that between closing your potential and where are you and where's your potential and how can I possibly close that gap?
yeah.
And that became the thing. And whether it be a topic of nutrition, whether it be your kit, whether it be your training, all these kinds of things, it just becomes a far more realistic thing because we all know, when Lionel Sanders came out with his training videos, everybody was like, oh my God, how are we ever going to do this? And then this comes out and then the Norwegians are doing X. It really doesn't matter in terms of heat prep, who's doing what.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I find it's very healthy to have a good why down the line.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that's what maybe like Taylor Nibb's superpower is that almost she's almost the opposite to that. She's so analytical that it's so removed from the result. It's all about the process. It's like
Yeah.
it's purely about like she'll win a race, say, like. I spoke to her before Dubai last year because she kept saying after the races, like, "Oh, I'm really disappointed with how I raced," but she just beat everyone by 8 minutes. And I was like, "Hey, Taylor, I know in your mind that's what you're thinking because you haven't executed what you have in your mind, but like." You just also have to bear in mind how that makes the other people feel because, like, you just smashed someone by 8 minutes, and then you go, "Actually, I'm not that happy with the race because five things went wrong." And I feel like, the person that got second is like, well, like, will anything make her happy? And then you saw her after San Francisco when she got second, and she was very chirpy and chipper because she actually had a good race and she executed it really well. Just someone was better. And I feel like that is almost like the level of enlightenment that everyone strives to be at. But then, for me, I'm
Totally.
just
And
like,
and you
yeah,
can't make yourself reliant on other people's feelings. If they feel bad because you took 8 minutes out of them, then that's on them. That is, something that's very much. I obviously, you know me well enough that I can be honest. Like I struggle with, right? I mean, you don't come to race day to make friends. You come to race day to win,
yeah,
and it's wonderful. You should race fair, but friendships form along the way, or they don't. But yeah, it really is something that I think you should be quite agnostic to. Um,
absolutely.
I've taken lots of your time to recover. I feel like I'd love to finish this off. In your young career, if someone else is in your shoes and they're chasing the pro dream, what is the one honest truth you'd wish you knew about being a pro 5 years ago?
There's no special place, thing, training session. You don't have to travel overseas. You don't have to get the latest XYZ. You can, if you're a good athlete and you train really well, then you're gonna be a good athlete and just train really well. Like I feel like I was very talented. Like when I was in New Zealand, I was at home, I was training really well, but I thought like now I have to go overseas to be a better athlete when I was already a good athlete. It's like, you know, just do your best, what we're sort of saying, but like literally like, and it's such a meritocracy. Like good things will happen to you if you're performing well and you're a good person. Like that's just the simple truth.
Love it, Carl. Thanks very much. That is a wrap for us on today's Fuelin Sessions. A huge thanks to you, mate. It's been a true joy speaking to you, always honest and straight from the heart. And I hope if you're out there listening, grinding through your session, this gave you a little bit of fuel. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review if you enjoyed it. And as always, eat smart, train hard, and keep chasing the edge. Till next time.